somebody was calling the moon on the phone, and the little pictures in our textbooks where all these people were pushing these giant stones on these log rollers. Welcome back and happy Tuesday, turkeys. How long have we known each other?
We've known each other for 2 decades.
I am not apologizing for who I am or what I like or the people that I love.
How do I be a wife? How do I be a mom? And how do I be myself and all of that? You didn't see that coming, did you?
Good morning. Welcome back. If you're listening, Kayla's recording while pregnant, and I am quite certain that by the time this drops into the public ears, there will be a baby on the outside part of the world.
That better be the case, or else there's some serious issues happening.
I guess
So
I
crazy.
meant, unless I randomly dropped this earlier. But here we are to talk about quote-unquote facts that we were taught that I'm now highly skeptical of. And I would like to preface this by saying, in most of these situations, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. And I am not so deep down the rabbit hole of information that I understand all of the nuance and can back up my doubt of the fact. But it's like we've talked about before. There's all these things that I had previous assumptions of as being hard and fast and 100% true. And starting off little by little, doubts have creeped in. And I was going to ask you, where did your doubts start? And I wanted to say that mine, I realized, started when we were told that Columbus was, in fact, not a nice person. That was the first time I remember being in school and thinking, wait a minute, you put in my textbook that Columbus was a good guy who came over here to benevolently tell people about, I don't even know, agriculture and Jesus. And now all of a sudden you're telling me he gave people chickenpox blankets and ruined people's lives. And I remember being a kid, and it fucked me up. And that was the beginning of the end.
It wasn't until later that I got exposed to him not being a good person. Or so be the story. I don't know, I'm so confused. But anyway, I think I've always been a little skeptical. But if you really want to know I will say I'm a little into the rabbit hole. You look in. I'm like a couple levels down, but anyway, so mine make it a little weird.
I'll go down but not on every single one of these. Like Columbus, I haven't done any further research.
Me either, but I think just more on a serious note, when I was going through some health stuff and none of the doctors could help me, I'm like, what are you experts doing if you can't help me? And then I find out information that can help me. And then I started questioning that, and then it started making me question other things, and then it started making me question other things, and then, yeah.
Here we are. Other contributing factors were my time working in the criminal justice system and being exposed to what prosecutorial discretion looks like, and working for the federal government in general, realizing what that can be and mean. And how even agencies with lovely intent, you just have too many people involved and things go sideways. Even if everybody has the best intentions, things just get too big at some point and then they tend to get weird. And then also just how much bad actors can really influence people who care.
Mm-hmm.
One turd, not even necessarily at the top, can poison the whole well of people who have the desire to do the right thing. Through manipulation. Anyway,
yeah, one
and
kid
crime
poops in the pool and you all got to get out. Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll just start off with a whammy with the fact that Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And this is one, again, where I can't go down any facts and figures and give anybody any solid reason why, but it's just when you stop and you think about somebody was calling the moon on the phone.
With no delay.
With no problem, crystal clear. That all just, even if the actual thing happened, I just still sort of feel skeptical about the entire dog and pony show that was televised. It just seems as though something is fishy. Again, I'm not hook, line, and sinker one way or the other, but I feel uncertain, and it's really fun anytime anyone brings up the moon for Jason and I to look at each other and then go allegedly.
My biggest question that I will just stand on and not get into the weeds of things because that's where things get weird. Why haven't we gone back? Because the technology was lost. Can we not recreate the technology? Don't we
I
have
mean,
better technology?
do we not want to spend the money? That sort of seems feasible.
But then why has no one else?
Yeah, that's true. I feel like China would really want to get up there and, flip us
Yeah.
off.
And what about like Van Allen belt? I don't even know the
Oh yeah, that
science
weird
behind
thing
it.
about the radiation, and every other time they tried to send something through there that was a mammal, it didn't survive. And then I think Russia sent a dog, and then it died immediately upon its return, and it didn't even go all the way through.
If you're just listening, you can't see me. Yeah, every time you say something. Yeah, big questions there for sure. Anyway, okay. Speaking of questions and history, this one kind of makes me really question things because we were taught that ancient civilizations were very primitive and like caveman,
Yeah.
rah rah, tools that they made. But then we have structures like whether that's buildings or the pyramids or what I would call the lost civilization of what is it now?
Atlantis.
Like all of the things they made, like even the architecture way, 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 way back in the day. I get that we do things differently now for money purposes, but it's just like, well, how did they even do stuff like that? And why are buildings like there's just so many when you start looking at history and what was made, it's like, how did they make this stuff if they were so primitive? They either weren't or they had help from someone thing. I don't know. So those are my questions.
This reminds me of the other day Jason was talking about Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, where the first humans flew the plane, the
Okay.
Wright brothers.
Yes.
So he was saying that, and then I immediately did my allegedly. And he started rolling his eyes and I was like, hear me out, hear me out. I think they were the first ones in recent history that we remember, but do you really think that no one before them since the dawn of time of humans has ever flown? And that's when I think he decided that he was done with me for that evening. But to your point, that was also my thing. The whole fact that the Egyptians built the pyramids with these pulleys and these weird, they made stone pyramids with stone tools that were that precise. And the little pictures in our textbooks where all these people were pushing these giant stones on these log rollers that they were quarrying from these extreme distances and size. That was it too as a kid. Like I didn't comprehend what the size and the weight of these things are, and that we can't transport them with our machinery across the rugged terrain. I'm like, okay, if you would have presented this to me as conjecture of here's what we think happened, I think I'd be less bitter about it. But it doesn't make sense to me, and I've not been explained it in a way that could make sense.
I agree. 100%.
My next point of a fact that I have a problem with is just basically any recent history in which they say that someone was unalived by a lone gunman. Any lone gunman theory just feels wishy-washy at this point.
Yeah. Yep, that's a good one. There's a lot to be thought about here. I'm trying to find my words to say it correctly. Historically, I feel like there's enough events with lots of questions surrounding them that makes me feel the same way about that theory.
Yep. Especially any historical event that then led to a massive world conflict or a conflict that then generated billions of dollars in defense contracts. I feel, even if it wasn't manufactured, feels like it was monopolized upon, which makes me very sketchy of the motives of people making the decisions.
I agree. Okay, I have to go back to ancient civilizations real quick because we were just talking about the pyramids or just like making stuff. This is off topic a little bit, but remember when we were taught that like there was tombs in the pyramids?
Yes.
Remember like the pharaohs or the kings and stuff were like underneath, but there's literally none. None have been found.
It's the king's chamber, right? They went in there and they took his sarcophagus out.
Dude, that's what I remember being taught, but like all these like up to date documentaries and stuff. There is no, that wasn't the place for them. I don't know why they thought that.
But
I
then
hope so.
they were saying too, though, that it doesn't make sense from what I was listening to the other day, it doesn't make sense that you could contribute the whole thing to being a tomb when there was just like one dude in one antechamber of the whole thing, and that there's actually giant structures underneath them and passageways that we know nothing about.
Yeah, maybe it's more like we were taught that these pyramids were built for like burial grounds, but really it's not, and maybe they threw one person in there.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that was the sole purpose.
It's too much mystery around those things. I have questions.
Here's another fun fact that I've since realized is false. I vividly feel as though the general consensus of what I absorbed was that pharmaceutical companies are out here trying to make medications and save people's lives. And while I do think that there are individuals within these organizations who are trying to save people's lives and have good intentions, and I do not want to paint all of them with the same broad strokes, it is very inconvenient and very foundation wrecking when you realize that a pharmaceutical company like Purdue Pharma created the opiate epidemic essentially by intentionally not acknowledging the addictive quality of these medications, pushing them on everybody, and then somehow also these same pharmaceutical companies that have benefited wildly from the sale of addictive medications are now benefiting from the quote-unquote cure for these medications through Narcan, Suboxone, and methadone. Like, how do you get to make a problem and then profit off of the problem on the back end and still try to tell people that you're helping them?
There are so many examples of that. And when I learned what the revolving door is between pharmaceuticals and usually three-letter agencies that regulate the pharmaceuticals, I have completely started questioning everything. Oh, why? There's just too much money in it. And I'd say this with everything. If you have too much money in anything, it's going to go corrupt in some way. Even not everyone, not everyone's bad. But what are the chances? They're going to make something that does harm and then make something that fixes the harm. Lovely. So let's see, where do I go from there? Well, fun fact. Remember when fat makes you fat? We were all taught that.
Bro.
We were all taught that fat makes you fat and that we should have all the grains in the food pyramid. And that was all funded by the sugar industry to make us be more likely to eat sugar. So now I question all of the dietary guidelines.
Recommendations.
Yeah, what? Someone eat like 8 servings of bread or something like that.
Another fact that I'm now struggling with is the age of anything in ancient history with carbon dating. This is one where I do not understand the in-depth multitude of information that one would need to fully comprehend carbon dating. But I think what my brain does is it says, that makes sense as a general rule. But doesn't it also seem like it's impossible to have calculated how carbon decays if there were events that we don't know happened? And this is where I genuinely don't know. So someone could explain this to me and then maybe I would not feel so uncertain. But what if there was some type of major catastrophe? Or what if there was some type of major freeze or thaw or heat? Does carbon's dating or its decay rate change based upon the environment? Or do we know for a fact that it's constant across different exposures?
That's a great question. I do not understand that whatsoever. Like, I get the concept, but again, it's like, just looking at these few things that we can see now in 2025, you can say that things are X amount of years old. Then I just saw something that was like skeleton found from 1 million years ago. And I'm like, well, that really F's up the whole timeline of stuff. I'm so confused.
It seems as though you should be allowed to at least ask the question. Because this seems like a good rule of thumb. But can we also maybe say, could we improve that technique? Or are we sure there's not a way to poke a hole in it? That's my question.
I agree. I'm confused. I was hearing things. Okay, so here's one that I'm curious about. My question is, there's probably some reason, so don't come at me. I just learned a fun fact that between 2021 and 2023, Antarctica actually gained 108 billion tons of ice per year. But we have global warming, so I just have questions. I don't know. I don't get it.
I wish I was independently wealthy and I could just travel down rabbit holes all day, every day, and find out more information.
I thought you were going to say, I wish I could travel to Antarctica. I'm like, they're not going to let you do that regardless.
No, but I could apply for an Office of Polar something job on USA Jobs that I found the other day because they were hiring for some polar job, and the description literally said 6 months on ice and 6 months off ice. And then it also required you to go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy and be trained with the U.S. Marshal Service. And I really want to understand, on what planet do we think we have law enforcement jurisdiction over anybody in the Antarctica? I have so many questions. I want that job just to know what the hell is going on. Here's a fact that I have a hard time fully believing now, which is human evolution. And let me say this, that I am fully on board because it seems quite established that things evolve over time. Species and people and plants and things and the earth in general, and that seems to be a pretty established fact. However, timeline of humans that I've been told was a fact doesn't really seem like it makes sense, and it sort of seems like we oversimplified some shit, and it also seems like we have found a bunch of these other weird skeletons that don't necessarily seem like they're Homo sapiens. So I just kind of feel uncertain about what I've been told in general as it relates to that fact.
My biggest question behind that theory, which I was fully on board with, but now I just have questions, is if we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? Right? Like, if we all evolved...
Well, I guess if we all had a common ancestor and then they all sprouted off, but...
There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot going on, and it just seems like we have to have... If we truly evolved in the way that other animals have evolved, it just seems like it should have taken longer from my Bobo review of different people's explanations. And I would also just really like to wrap this up by saying that I have a hard time with facts of any kind, and I want people to know that it's not because I think the world is a complete gray area and that there's no such thing as truth, because I think that's garbage. But I also think that it's ridiculous to think that at any point in time that we know 100% with 100% certainty how anything works or how anything came to be. And it just seems that everybody should remember that we have debunked things that we thought were truth and fact for all of recent human history, to include lobotomies and the Earth being the center of the universe. I don't need to go into a whole lot of that, but these things change. So what, when we used to say that bloodletting was a great way to get rid of a fever because you had to drain out the whatevers, now we look back and we say that's silly. I don't understand that why we think at this current point in time that 100 years from now we wouldn't look back and think that at least some of the things that we thought and did were silly. And perhaps facts are always something that can potentially change, and you do the best that you can with what you have, and then you always let the door at least stay unlocked to have a new interpretation of new information as new information becomes available. Isn't that science?
Yes. Which is why we need to be flexible and keep an open mind and reserve the right to change our minds and not stigmatize people for having questions, because isn't that how we evolve?
I don't want to be the person that's the chronic skeptic, that's the pain in the ass, where you just ask questions to be a giant turd. But I also think that it is helpful to have an open mind and to be curious. And perhaps that is how I'd like to label myself, as someone who's curious, not skeptical, because skeptical seems negative, and curious seems open and optimistic to new possibilities.
I like it.
And until next week.
Love you, bye.
Love you, bye.